The ship was called Bakedu, and it was the most important vessel humanity had ever built, not because it was the biggest or the fastest, but because of what it carried. 200 people sent to ask a simple question: can we sit with you? Captain Han Dowen stood at the bridge window and watched the Nexion spire grow larger against the black of space. It was enormous. The station was the size of a small moon, ancient and covered in lights that blinked in patterns older than human civilization itself. It orbited a dying red star, and the glow made the whole structure look like it was breathing. Dowen was a calm man. He had commanded ships for 20 years, fought pirates on the edge of the Sol system, and negotiated trade deals with 3 alien species. But this was different. This was the center of the galaxy's power. 42 species sat on the Galactic Ruling Council, and they had ruled known space for 12,000 years. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. To the Council, humans were babies crawling into a room full of giants. Yoon Nari walked onto the bridge, carrying a datapad. She was the ship's chief science officer, a woman who spoke 11 alien languages and had memorized the political history of every council species. She was thin, sharp-eyed, and never smiled unless she meant it. "The council has approved our docking request," she said. "Bay 94, lower level." Dowen raised an eyebrow. "Lower level?" "It is an insult," Nari said flatly. "Visiting dignitaries dock on the upper ring. Bay 94 is where they receive cargo shipments and waste transports." Dowen nodded slowly. He had expected this. "Then we dock at Bay 94, and we smile while we do it." The Bakedu slid into the massive station like a small fish entering the mouth of a whale. The docking clamps locked, and Dowen led his delegation through the airlock and into a wide corridor that smelled of metal and something faintly sweet, like old flowers. Council guards stood on either side, tall insectoid soldiers with black armor and weapons that hummed with energy. They did not greet the humans. They simply watched. The walk to the council chamber took almost an hour. The Nexion spire was a maze of corridors, lifts, and open plazas where dozens of alien species moved about their business. Some stopped to stare at the humans. A few pointed. One group of small, furry creatures whispered to each other and then hurried away, as if the humans carried a disease. Dowen kept his back straight and his face calm. Behind him walked Nari, then rows of diplomats and scientists in clean uniforms. At the rear, a small security team of Marines moved quietly, their eyes scanning every shadow. Among them was Sergeant Bake Suho, a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his jaw, and Quan Yena, a combat medic with steady hands and sharp instincts. The council chamber was breathtaking. It was a vast circular room with seats carved into the walls, rising in tiers like an ancient arena. Each seat belonged to a different species, and the designs were wildly different. Some were nests, some were pools of liquid, some were simply pedestals where beings of light hovered silently. At the top, on a throne of dark crystal, sat High Arbiter Tolman. He was insectoid, nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms folded across his chest and compound eyes that reflected the chamber's light like shattered mirrors. Dowen was given a small platform at the very bottom of the chamber. He had to look up at everyone. Another insult. He did not react. He spoke simply. He told the council that humanity was young and knew it. He said that Earth had no interest in conquest, that humans wanted to trade, to learn, and to contribute. He said that the galaxy was large enough for all of them. "We did not come to prove our worth," Dowen said, and his voice was steady and clear, despite the enormous silence pressing down on him. "We came because we believe the galaxy is better shared." The silence that followed was heavy. Then Tolman spoke. His voice was like dry leaves scraping across stone. "You are a flicker species, the High Arbiter said. Your individual lives last less than a single rotation of our slowest calendar. Your civilization is an infant. You have nothing to offer this council, and you presume much by standing in this chamber. Several delegates clicked, hissed, or rumbled in agreement. The mockery was open and casual, as if they were discussing an animal that had wandered into their house. Only one voice spoke differently. Delegate Vishan, a tall reptilian with green-gold scales and calm yellow eyes, leaned forward from his seat. The humans adapt, Vishan said, faster than any species we have catalogued. Perhaps we should not dismiss them so quickly. Tolman turned one of his forehands in a gesture of dismissal. Your sympathy is noted, Vishan, and ignored. The session ended. The humans were escorted to quarters on one of the lowest residential levels of the spire. Cramped rooms meant for maintenance workers. Dowan thanked the council liaison politely and closed the door. That note, Nari sat with Dowan in his small quarters and spread her data across a table. The council is not as united as they pretend, she said. There are at least 6 species on the edge of leaving. 3 more are in open economic dispute with Tolman's faction. They are afraid, Dowan. Not of us, of each other. Dowan stared at the wall. That fear might be useful one day. Today we are guests, and we will behave like guests. Nari studied him for a moment, and then nodded. Far above them, in a sealed chamber that no outsider had ever entered, High Arbiter Tolman convened a private meeting with the representatives of 6 elder species. The room was dark, and the words spoken inside it were not recorded. Tolman placed his 4 hands flat on the table. The humans grow too fast, he said. They breed quickly, they learn quickly, they are unpredictable, and unpredictable species become dangerous species. We will not wait for them to become a threat. He gave the order. Not against Earth. That would come later. First, the message had to be clear and close. The order was to destroy the Bakedu and kill every human on the Nexion Spire, every diplomat, every scientist, every marine, all of them. The 6 delegates agreed, without argument. The decision took less than 10 minutes. 2 floors below, Captain Han Dowan slept peacefully, still believing that words could be enough. 3 days passed on the Nexion Spire, and they were almost good days. The human delegation had settled into a quiet routine. Scientists exchanged research with curious junior species. Diplomats held informal talks over meals that neither side fully understood how to eat. A few of the younger alien delegates even visited the human quarters out of genuine interest, asking about Earth's oceans, its music, its strange habit of keeping animals as companions. Baek Suho did not trust any of it. He stood in the corridor outside the docking level on the 3rd night, running a standard patrol, with Quan Yena beside him. Suho was not a man who relaxed easily. 20 years in the Marines had taught him that the moment you stopped watching was the moment something killed you. And right now, something felt wrong. Look at the bay, he said quietly. Yena followed his gaze through the observation window. Below them, the Bakedu sat in its docking cradle, small and alone. But around it, in a slow and deliberate pattern, Council warships were moving into new positions. 3 heavy cruisers had shifted to block the exit corridor. A ring of smaller gunships now hovered above the Bakedu, like birds circling a wounded animal. That is not a standard rotation, Yena said. Suho contacted the bridge. The watch officer relayed the concern to Captain Dowan, who raised it with the council liaison. The response came back within minutes. It was a routine security adjustment, nothing more. Standard procedure when foreign vessels were docked for extended periods. Dowan accepted the answer. He had no reason not to. The council had been rude, not hostile. There was a difference between contempt and violence, and Dowan believed in that difference. He was wrong. The attack came at the 22nd hour of the station's cycle, when most of the human delegation was asleep. There was no warning, no alarm, no demand for surrender. The doors to the human residential level simply opened, and Council shock troops poured through like a flood. They were elite soldiers from 3 elder species: insectoid heavy infantry, reptilian close combat units, and tall, pale beings that moved in complete silence. They carried plasma weapons and bladed tools designed for cutting through armor. They moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, kicking open doors and firing into rooms where humans lay sleeping in their beds. The sound was something Suho would never forget. Not the weapons fire. He had heard weapons before. It was the screaming. It was people who had come in peace. People who carried data pads instead of guns. People who had spent the day learning alien poetry and sharing photographs of their children. And now they were dying in the dark, confused and afraid, and calling out for help that was not coming. 143 people died in the first 15 minutes. Suho and Yena were near the maintenance level when the shooting started. They heard it through the walls, the rapid crack of plasma fire, the dull thud of bodies hitting the floor. Suho grabbed his sidearm and pulled Yena into a service corridor. "We cannot fight them head-on," Yena said. Her voice was tight, but controlled. She was already thinking. "There are too many." "I know," Suho said. "We gather who we can. We move down." They ran through the lower corridors, collecting survivors as they went. A young diplomat with blood on her face. 2 scientists who had been working late in a lab. A group of Marines who had been in the gym. One by one, the survivors found each other in the darkness, drawn together by whispered calls and shared terror. 23 people. That was all that was left. Above them, on the Bakedu, Captain Han Dowen was fighting his own battle. The ship shook as Council warships opened fire on its hull. Alarms screamed across every deck. The engines were hit first, 2 direct strikes that tore through the drive section and left the ship dead in space. Then the weapons array, then the shields. Dowen stood on the bridge as fire crawled across the ceiling and sparks rained down around him. He gave one order to his crew: abandon ship. Then he turned to Yunari. "The comm drone," he said. "Launch it. Everything we have. Every recording. Every sensor log. Every piece of evidence. Earth needs to know what happened here." Nari's hands moved across her console with desperate speed. The drone was small, barely the size of a person, but it carried a faster-than-light engine and enough data storage to hold the entire truth. She uploaded everything: video feeds of the attack, sensor data showing the Council warships firing first, audio recordings of the screaming, and then she added her own voice. "They killed our people while they slept," Nari said into the recorder, and her voice cracked only once. "Send everything." The drone launched from the Bakedu's belly, just as another volley struck the ship's midsection. Nari was thrown from her console. The bridge was collapsing. Dowen reached for the ship-wide comm one last time. "To any crew still alive on the spire," he said, and his voice was calm even now, even at the end. "Live, bear witness, Earth will answer." The Bakedu broke apart 3 minutes later. Its remains drifted against the red glow of the dying star, and the Council warships pulled back, their work done. Deep inside the spire, Suho heard the captain's last words through a flickering comm unit. He closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he opened them and kept moving. The 23 survivors crawled through maintenance tunnels that were barely wide enough for a human body. Yena treated wounds as they moved: a broken arm, a plasma burn across a young woman's back, a Marine who was bleeding from his side and refusing to stop walking. They had no food, no plan, and no way to contact Earth. Then a door opened ahead of them, and Delegate Vishon stood in the dim light. The reptilian's yellow eyes moved across the group of bloody, shaking humans. His face showed something that Suho had not seen from any council species since they arrived. Shame. I voted against this, Vishan said quietly. I was overruled. I cannot undo what has been done. But I can give you a chance. He handed Suho a data chip containing access codes to a hidden shuttle bay on the station's far side. He gave Yena a map of the maintenance network that would get them there without being detected, and he gave them a warning. Tolman will send hunters. You have perhaps 2 hours before they find your trail. Move fast and do not stop. Suho took the chip and looked at the alien for a long moment. Why? He asked. Vishan's jaw tightened. Because some crimes are too large to stand beside in silence. They ran. For 2 hours, they crawled and climbed and dragged each other through the guts of the ancient station. Yena kept the wounded moving. Suho kept watch behind them. Twice they heard the sound of council soldiers in nearby corridors, and twice they held their breath in the darkness until the footsteps passed. They reached the shuttle bay with minutes to spare. The shuttle was small and old, but its engines worked, and its FTL drive was functional. Suho strapped everyone in, sealed the hatch, and launched without clearance. 2 council patrol ships fired on them as they cleared the station, but the shots went wide, and then the shuttle's drive kicked in, and the stars stretched into lines, and the Nexion spire disappeared behind them. In the silence of faster-than-light travel, 23 humans sat in a stolen shuttle and breathed. Some of them cried. Some of them stared at nothing. Yena held the hand of the young diplomat who had not spoken since the attack. Suho sat alone in the pilot's seat and watched the blue tunnel of FTL space rush past the window. He thought about Captain Dowan's last words. Earth will answer. He did not know how. He did not know when. But he believed it with every broken bone in his body. 12 days later, the comm drone arrived at Earth. It entered the atmosphere at high speed and was recovered by a military unit within the hour. The data was verified, authenticated, and delivered to the United Earth Parliament. They played Yoon Nari's recording in the main chamber. Every representative heard her voice. They heard the screaming in the background. They saw the video of sleeping people being shot in their beds. The chamber was silent for a long time. And then, it was not. Earth had not gone to war in over 300 years. There had been no need. Humanity had spent centuries healing itself, building outward, reaching for the stars with open hands. The old weapons had been locked away. The old instincts had been buried under layers of civilization, diplomacy, and hope. It took one recording to dig them all back up. Cho Hae-yoon sat in a secure room beneath the Parliament building in Geneva and watched the data from the comm drone for the 7th time. She was the director of Earth's Interstellar Intelligence Bureau, a woman who had spent her career studying alien species, mapping power structures, and predicting threats before they arrived. She had warned the Parliament 2 years ago that the Council might not welcome humanity. She had recommended a larger military escort for the Bakedu. She had been told that sending warships would send the wrong message. Now 177 people were dead, and the right message had not saved any of them. Hae-yoon organized every piece of evidence into a single file and presented it to the War Cabinet. She stood in front of 12 of the most powerful people on Earth and laid out the truth in plain language. The massacre was not an accident. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a planned, authorized military operation, approved by the High Arbiter himself, and carried out by the elite forces of 3 elder species. The goal was to kill every human on the spire and destroy the Bakedu, leaving no evidence and no survivors. The Council intended to follow this with a propaganda campaign, blaming the humans for an act of sabotage that never happened. They meant to erase us from the record, Hae-yoon said, and then they meant to come for Earth. The cabinet listened, and then they authorized total wartime mobilization, something that had not happened since the last great conflict on Earth itself, centuries ago. The change was immediate and enormous. Factories that had been building colony ships switched to producing warships. Shipyards in orbit around Earth, Mars, and the asteroid belt began working around the clock. Scientists who had spent their lives studying alien biology now studied alien weaknesses. Engineers who had designed trading vessels now designed weapons platforms. The entire machinery of human civilization turned, slowly and then all at once, toward a single purpose. But it was not mindless. Heian made sure of that. This would not be a blind charge into the dark. This would be precise, calculated, and devastating. The survivors arrived on Earth 4 weeks after the massacre. Their shuttle had limped through space on a damaged drive, making short jumps and drifting between them. When they finally reached the Sol system, a patrol ship found them and escorted them home. 23 people stepped off the shuttle onto Earth's soil, and the crowd that had gathered to meet them did not cheer. They simply stood in silence, and many of them wept. Bakedu was asked to give his testimony before a global broadcast. He agreed without hesitation. He sat in a plain chair, in a plain room, looked into the camera, and began to speak. He did not talk about the politics. He did not talk about strategy, or alien technology, or the layout of the Nexion spire. He talked about people. He said their names, every single one. He described who they were. The young botanist from Busan who had been excited to study alien plant life. The translator from Daegu who could make anyone laugh in any language. The old professor who had brought paper books because he did not trust digital readers. The marine private who had just turned 21 and had never been off Earth before. It took Suho 40 minutes to read every name. He did not cry. His voice did not shake. He simply said each name as if it were the most important word in any language. And when he was finished, he looked into the camera and said, "These are the people who believe the galaxy would welcome them. Remember them." 11 billion people watched, and 11 billion people remembered. Quan Yena did not speak to cameras. She went to work. Within days of arriving on Earth, she was in a military research facility, working alongside engineers to analyze fragments of Council weapons and shield technology that the survivors had brought with them. Pieces of armor plating, energy signatures recorded by their shuttle sensors, data from Nari's comm drone showing the exact frequencies of Council weapons fire. Human engineers had always been fast learners. Give them a problem and they would solve it. Give them a broken piece of alien technology and they would not just understand it, they would improve it. Within weeks, new weapon systems were being tested. New shield configurations were being installed on ships. New armor plating, designed to absorb and redirect Council plasma fire, was rolling off production lines. Yena worked 18-hour days. When someone told her to rest, she shook her head and kept working. She had held people as they died on the Nexion spire. She had pressed her hands against wounds that would not stop bleeding. She was done holding. Now she was building. Commander Park Jinu was given command of the combined Earth Armada. He was a quiet man with a reputation for thinking 10 moves ahead. He did not give inspiring speeches. He did not pound tables or raise his voice. He sat in rooms with maps and data, and he planned. The Armada was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. 4,000 warships, built in secret across every orbital facility Earth controlled. Destroyers, carriers, stealth frigates, and heavy battleships, all constructed with new technology derived from Council designs and improved by human ingenuity. Every ship carried the names of the dead painted on its hull in white letters, not as decoration, as a promise. Jinu's strategy was not simple destruction. He studied Heun's intelligence reports and Nari's surviving data about Council politics. He saw what Nari had seen. The Council was fractured. held together by tradition and fear more than loyalty. If he could strike the right targets in the right order, the coalition would collapse on its own. He did not need to defeat 42 species. He needed to defeat 3 and terrify the rest. "We hit their eyes first," Genu told his staff. "Then we offer the rest a door to walk through. Most of them will take it." Earth sent one final message to the Nexian spire before the fleet launched. It was transmitted on an open channel, so every species with a receiver could hear it. The message was not a declaration of war. It was a list, the names of all 177 humans who had been killed. And at the bottom, a single line. "We remember every name. You will remember ours." High Arbiter Tolman received the message in his private chamber. He read it, and then he set it aside. He called a meeting of his military advisors and told them to prepare defensive positions, but he did not seem concerned. He had seen young species rage before. They always burned bright and then faded. Humans would be no different. "They are mammals with metal ships," Tolman said. "They will grieve, and then they will disappear." Delegate Vishon heard the message too, but that night, he began quietly moving his people away from Council military installations. He evacuated civilian populations from border worlds. He stored food and medical supplies in hidden locations. He did not know exactly what was coming, but he had looked into Bakesuho's eyes in that maintenance tunnel, and he had seen something that Tolman had not. He had seen patience. Not the patience of weakness, but the patience of someone who knows exactly what they are going to do, and is simply waiting for the right moment to do it. The combined Earth Armada launched from the Sol system on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. 4,000 ships moved out of orbit in perfect formation, past the outer planets, and entered faster than light travel, in complete radio silence. No flags flew, no anthems played, no speeches were broadcast. There was nothing left to say. The dead had said it all. The galaxy had never been silent before. In 12,000 years of Council rule, the communication relay network had never gone dark. It was the nervous system of galactic civilization, thousands of ancient stations scattered across known space, carrying messages, orders, trade data, and military commands between 42 species at the speed of light. It had been built over millennia and maintained with religious devotion. It was considered indestructible. Commander Park Jinu destroyed 70% of it in a single night. The operation was called Phase 1, and it was beautiful in its cruelty. Human stealth ships, small and fast and nearly invisible to Council sensors, had been moving into position for weeks. They drifted between relay stations like ghosts, mapping patrol routes and identifying weaknesses. And then, on Jinu's command, they struck simultaneously across an area of space so vast that the Council could not have responded even if they had seen it coming. The relay stations died one by one. Some were hit with precision missiles that punched through their cores. Others were disabled by electronic warfare, human-designed viruses that burned through alien software like fire through paper. A few were simply cut loose from their power sources and left to drift in the dark, useless and cold. When it was done, the galaxy went quiet. Species that had been talking to each other for thousands of years suddenly could not hear anything at all. Military fleets lost contact with their command centers. Trade ships could not receive navigation updates. Governments could not reach their colonies. It was as if someone had reached into the brain of a living creature and severed every nerve at once. Panic was immediate and total. Jinu did not wait for the panic to settle. Phase 2 began within hours. Cho Heun's intelligence work had identified the 3 species most directly responsible for the massacre. The species whose soldiers had pulled the triggers, whose commanders had given the orders, whose governments had voted yes in Talmon's secret meeting. These were the targets. The Earth Armada hit their home fleets with overwhelming force. Not scattered raids or hit-and-run attacks, but full-scale engagements where human warships arrived in numbers that the enemy could not match, and fought with a discipline that the galaxy had never seen. Council admirals had expected human ships to fight like their species behaved, emotional, disorganized, reckless. They were wrong about all of it. Human crews operated in rotating shifts, fighting around the clock without pause. When one tactic failed, they adapted within minutes, changing formations and strategies mid-battle as if the entire fleet shared a single mind. They took losses and kept advancing. They lost ships and closed the gaps. They did not retreat, they did not hesitate, and they did not stop. One council admiral, commanding the defense of a major staging area, broke communication protocol and transmitted on an open channel during the third day of fighting. His message was picked up by ships on both sides. "They do not stop," the admiral said, and there was something in his voice that had not been there before, something very close to fear. "They do not tire. What are these creatures?" No one answered him. His fleet was destroyed 4 hours later. While the military engagements continued, Jinnu executed Phase 3. This was not a military operation. It was a political one. Human communication ships, using their own relay technology to bypass the destroyed Council network, contacted every non-aggressor species individually. The message was the same each time, delivered calmly and without threats. "We have no quarrel with you. The humans who died on the Nexian spire were killed by specific species under specific orders. We know who gave those orders. We know who carried them out. If you are not part of it, you have nothing to fear from us. Stand aside, and you will not be touched. Stand with the Council, and you will share their fate. The choice is yours." It worked. 19 species withdrew from the Council alliance within the first week. Some did it openly, announcing their departure in public broadcasts. Others simply pulled their fleets back to their home systems and stopped answering Council calls. The coalition that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years began to fall apart like a building losing its walls, one by one. Jinnu watched the reports come in from his command ship and allowed himself a small nod. The war was being won not just with weapons, but with truth. Every species that defected did so because they had seen the evidence. The video of sleeping humans being murdered, the recordings of Nari's voice, the sensor data proving the Council fired first. The truth was the most powerful weapon in the fleet, and Jinnu used it without mercy. 6 weeks into the campaign, Jinnu gave the order for the final operation, the Nexian Spire. Bakedu had requested this mission personally. He had stood in Jinnu's office and made his case with the same steady calm he had used to read the names of the dead on global broadcast. He did not ask for revenge. He asked for closure. "I walked out of that station, through a maintenance tunnel, bleeding and hiding like an animal," Suho said. "I would like to walk back in through the front door." Jinnu approved the mission. Suho assembled a Marine strike team of 200 volunteers. Every one of them had lost someone on the Bakedu. They trained for 2 weeks in simulated environments built from the station schematics that Delegate Vishen had provided months earlier. They knew every corridor, every lift, every choke point. The assault on the Nexion Spire was supported by the main fleet, engaging the remaining Council Loyalist ships at the Gen Corridor, a narrow passage of navigable space that served as the last defensive line before the station. The Council had gathered everything they had left, hundreds of warships from a dozen species, arranged in layers of overlapping fire. It was the strongest defensive position they could build. Jinnu broke through it in 9 hours. The cost was real. Human ships were destroyed, crews were lost, but for every ship that fell, 2 more pushed forward, and the line buckled, and then shattered, and then ceased to exist. A loyalist fleet scattered, and the path to the spire was open. Suho's Marines launched from their carrier in assault shuttles, cutting through the station's outer defenses, while Quan Yena worked from a command shuttle behind them. She knew the spire systems better than anyone alive. She had studied them during the diplomatic visit, mapped them during the escape, and memorized them during the months of preparation. Now she reached into the station's defensive grid and shut it down piece by piece, like a surgeon disconnecting alarms before an operation. She guided the Marines through the same maintenance tunnels she had crawled through covered in blood half a year earlier. The tunnels had not changed, but she had. She moved through them now with purpose and precision. And when a Council security team appeared at an intersection ahead of the Marines, it was Yena who spotted them first and called the warning that saved 6 lives. The Marines swept through the station level by level. Resistance was scattered and confused. Without the relay network, the station's defenders could barely coordinate. Some fought, some surrendered, some simply ran. The elder species who had once looked down at humans from their high seats now pressed themselves against walls as human soldiers walked past them with weapons raised and faces that showed nothing at all. Suho reached the council chamber at the end of the 7th hour. The great doors were sealed, but they were not built to withstand military breaching charges. They opened with a sound like thunder, and Suho stepped through into the vast circular room where Captain Han Dawan had once stood and asked for peace. The chamber was empty. Almost. The tiered seats that had held representatives of 42 species were abandoned. Screens were dark. Data terminals were dead. The room that had been the heart of galactic power for 12,000 years felt like a tomb. But at the top, on his throne of dark crystal, High Arbiter Tolman sat perfectly still. He had not run. He had not hidden. He sat with his forearms resting on the armrests, and his compound eyes fixed on the doors, as if he had been waiting. Suho walked across the chamber floor, his boots echoing in the silence. He stopped at the base of the steps leading up to the throne and looked at the creature who had ordered the death of everyone he had come here with. He did not raise his weapon. Captain Han Dawan stood here, Suho said, on this exact spot. He asked you for a seat at this table. You answered him with blood. Tolman said nothing. His eyes reflected the lights of Suho's armor like broken glass. Now the table is ours, Suho said, and then he turned away and gave the order to secure the station. The war was over. The council had fallen. Behind him, Tolman sat alone on his throne in a room that no longer meant anything, and for the first time in his long life, the High Arbiter understood what it meant to be a flicker. 2 months after the fall of the Nexian Spire, the galaxy was still learning how to breathe without the council. For 12,000 years, every major decision, trade routes, territorial disputes, resource allocation, even the calendar used by most species, had flowed through the council chamber. Now, that chamber was occupied by human Marines, who patrolled its corridors in quiet shifts, and the species that had once filled its seats were scattered, frightened, and waiting to see what would happen next. Some expected humanity to take the throne. They expected a new empire, human flags on every station, human laws imposed on every world, human warships stationed in every system. It was what the Council would have done. It was what any species that had ever seized power in the galaxy's long history had done. Humanity did not do it. The first sign came when Commander Park Jinu was offered the title of military governor of the Nexian Spire. It was proposed by a coalition of junior species who had defected from the Council during the war, and now wanted human protection. They offered Jinu control of the station, command of all remaining military forces, and authority over interstellar law. It was, in practical terms, the most powerful position any living being had ever been offered. Jinu declined it in a single sentence. Soldiers end wars, he said. They should not govern what comes after. He ordered the demobilization of the combined Earth Armada. The warships that had broken the Council were sent home, one fleet at a time, back to Earth's orbital stations, where they would be maintained, but not used. Genu himself returned to Earth and quietly resumed teaching at the Naval Academy in Incheon. When reporters asked him how it felt to command the greatest military campaign in human history, he said, "It felt necessary. I hope it never feels necessary again." The trial of High Arbiter Tolman took place on the Nexian Spire, in the same chamber where he had once ruled. A tribunal was assembled, human judges alongside representatives from the species that had defected from the Council. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy. Tolman did not deny what he had done. He could not. The evidence was complete and undeniable. Instead, he argued that he had acted in the interest of galactic stability. Humans were growing too fast, he said. They were unpredictable. They would have disrupted the order that had kept the galaxy at peace for millennia. Cho Haeun served as the lead prosecutor. She presented the evidence methodically and without emotion. The secret meeting, the kill order, the targeting of sleeping civilians, the plan to blame the victims. She let the facts speak, and the facts were damning. The tribunal found Tolman guilty on all charges. His sentence was exile. Permanent isolation on a dead moon at the edge of known space, with no contact with any living being for the remainder of his natural life. The only thing he would be given was a data archive containing the complete recorded history of humanity, from its earliest cave paintings to the present day. Haeun stood before him after the sentencing and spoke the last words he would hear from a human voice. "You called us a flicker species," she said. "Read our history. Learn what flickers can burn down." Tolman was taken away in silence. He did not resist. Whatever pride had kept him on his throne during the fall of the Spire seemed to have finally left him. Then something happened that no one expected. Yoon Nari arrived at the Spire. The galaxy had assumed she was dead. She had been on the Bakedu when it was destroyed, and no one had survived the ship's final moments. But Nari had. In the chaos of the attack, she had sealed herself inside a reinforced compartment near the ship's core. When the Bakedu broke apart, her compartment held. She drifted in the debris field for 6 days, surviving on emergency air and a single ration pack, until a neutral trading vessel picked up her distress signal and pulled her from the wreckage. She had spent the months of the war recovering on a medical station run by a species that had never taken sides. They healed her broken bones, treated her radiation exposure, and kept her identity hidden until it was safe. When the war ended, she chartered a transport to the Spire. She walked into the council chamber on a Tuesday morning, thinner than before, and with a new scar along her left temple. And Baek Suho, who had been managing the station's security, stopped in the middle of a sentence and stared at her as if he were looking at a ghost. Then he crossed the room and held her, and neither of them said anything for a long time. Nari did not rest. She had spent her recovery thinking, planning, designing. She carried with her a proposal for something new. Not a council, not an empire, not a hierarchy. She called it the Open Accord. The Accord was built on principles that were simple, but revolutionary by galactic standards. There would be no permanent ruling species. Leadership would rotate. Every species, regardless of how old or young their civilization was, would have an equal voice. Disputes would be resolved through mediation, not force. And the founding principle, written into the first line of the document, was this: no species shall be silenced for being young. It was everything the old council had not been, and it terrified some of the elder species who heard it, because it meant they would never again hold the kind of power they had once taken for granted. Delegate Vishen was the first non-human to sign the accord. He had risked his life to help the survivors escape the Spire, and he had spent the war quietly protecting civilians on both sides. Now he stood before the assembly and signed his name beside the human delegates. And when he did, he said, "I cannot undo the past, but I can help build something worth surviving for." His species became humanity's closest ally in the years that followed, and Vishen ensured that the full history of the Council's crime was preserved in every archive, in every language, without any attempt to soften or excuse what had been done. "The truth is not comfortable," he said. "It is not supposed to be." Suho and Yena were both offered positions of honor in the new order. Suho was asked to lead the Accord's security forces. Yena was asked to direct its medical division. Both of them declined. Suho returned to Earth. He took a teaching position at a military academy and spent his days training young soldiers. He never spoke publicly about the massacre again. But every year, on the anniversary, he would sit alone in a quiet room and read the names. All 177. It still took 40 minutes. Yena went further out. She opened a medical clinic on a border world, a small, dusty planet where humans and aliens lived side by side in uneasy peace. She treated everyone who came through her door, regardless of species. Some of her patients had been Council soldiers. She treated them the same as everyone else. When a journalist asked her why she would heal the same species that had killed her friends, Yena looked at him with steady eyes and said, "We did not fight, so we could become what they were." A memorial was built on the Nexion spire, in the exact corridor where the massacre had taken place. It was not grand or elaborate. It was a wall of smooth black stone, and on it were carved 177 names. At the base, in every known galactic language, a single inscription. They came in peace. They were answered in blood. They returned not for vengeance, but so no one would ever have to come in peace and be afraid. The final moment of the story belonged to Nari. She stood in the council chamber, the same room where Dowan had spoken, where Tolman had sneered, where Suho had claimed the table. The seats were filled not only with elder species, but with dozens of younger civilizations that had never been allowed a voice. Small species, new species, species that had been ignored or dismissed for centuries. They were all here now, and they were all equal. Nari looked at the seat where Tolman had once sat. It was empty. Through the chamber's great windows, she could see the memorial wall, lit softly against the darkness of space. She spoke. Captain Han Dowan once said, "The galaxy is better shared." He was right, but he should not have had to die for the galaxy to learn that. Let his death, and the deaths of 176 others, be the last time this lesson is taught in blood. The chamber was silent. Every delegate, every species, every living being in the room rose to their feet. They stood together, not because they were ordered to, not because tradition demanded it, but because something had changed. Something had shifted in the bones of the galaxy, and they could all feel it. It was not an ending. It was a beginning, and it had been paid for in full. The lights of the Nexion spire burned on against the dark, steady and bright, and the galaxy, for the first time in 12,000 years, began again.